need help finding a rental, are ready to buy a home, or want to sell a property, using a great real estate agent can be essential for a smooth and financially successful transaction. But if you don't understand exactly what various real estate pros do or how they work with clients, the industry can seem confusing. This podcast will review how to find the best real estate agent for your situation. I'll review what you should expect from great agents, how they get paid, and what to ask before hiring one. Welcome back, everyone. It's episode 944 of Money Girl, and I really appreciate you spending some time with me. I'm Laura Adams, an award-winning author, on-camera spokesperson, money speaker, and founder of The Money Stack. That's my Substack newsletter. You can subscribe for free or support the show and get access to live educational events when you become a paid member. And we have a July event coming up on becoming a successful investor. So if that is something that interests you, be sure to visit lauradadams.com, sign up for The Money Stack, and you'll get that information right in your inbox. All right, let's talk about the differences between real estate professionals. Just like every industry, real estate has lots of jargon. And I think some of the most misunderstood and maybe misused terminology has to do with, what professionals call themselves and what we call them. A lot of the terms are used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So things like real estate professional, agent, broker, realtor, and property manager. So hiring the best pro starts with understanding what they do and how some roles may even overlap. First, let's talk about the term real estate professional. This is just anyone working in the industry, and they may or may not be licensed to sell real estate. A real estate pro could be licensed as a property appraiser or work as a mortgage broker. They could even be a closing agent or a broker's assistant. So it's a basic, general term referring to people who work in the housing industry. Now, a real estate salesperson is what most people call an agent because they hold a state-issued license to sell real estate. So becoming a licensed salesperson is regulated at the state level, and every state's requirements are a little different. Many years ago, I was a licensed salesperson in Florida, where I still live. So I'm most familiar with the real estate regulations here, and I'll go through some of those for you. But again, it's going to be a little different if you live in a different state. So to take Florida's real estate salesperson exam, you have to be 18 years old, have a high school diploma, and pass a 63-hour pre-licensing course. And that can be from an approved real estate school where you go in person, or you can even take it online from an education platform like Aceable. The course covers all the topics you need to know, including real estate law, practices, and ethics. And it's basically just to get you prepared for the state-administered licensing exam. Once you pass a state exam and a criminal background check, including fingerprinting, you can submit an application and a fee to become a licensed salesperson. Again, that's just for your state. And some states do have some reciprocity, but in general, when you get that license, it means that you do have to stay within the bounds of your state. But that is just the beginning of an agent's educational requirements. Florida salespeople must pass a 45-hour post-licensing course before their first license renewal, which happens 2 years after you become licensed. Then you have to pass continuing education every 2 years to maintain your license. And again, you can do that in person or online using a platform like Aceable.com. So it's gotten a lot easier. Back when I was an agent, everything had to be done in person, and now there are just some really convenient options for getting that education done. Additionally, salespeople in most states cannot legally practice without working under or being sponsored by a licensed real estate broker. So a broker is a totally different thing than an agent. Again, although we tend to use those terms interchangeably, they're not the same. In Florida, to become a real estate broker, you must have held an active salesperson license for at least 24 months within the preceding 5 years. So basically, you've got to have a salesperson license for 5 years before you're even eligible for going up for being a broker. And you have to pass a state broker exam and broker-specific continuing education. Therefore, a real estate broker is a salesperson who completes more education. They pass a state broker exam, they've got more practical experience, and they typically own or manage a local real estate office. Now, another very confusing term in this industry is realtor. And I want to say it is not realtor, it is realtor, Realtor. And it's followed by the little R in the circle because it is a mark. It is a membership mark that is owned by the National Association of Realtors, or NAR. And this is a very misunderstood and misused term. The National Association of Realtors is very specific about how you can use this. They are the largest trade group in the industry, and you can only use this term after your name or call yourself a realtor if you join NAR and the mark is licensed to you. So in other words, every realtor is a real estate professional. But not every professional is a realtor. And again, NAR protects this designation fiercely because it distinguishes its members in the industry. For instance, realtors pledge to protect and promote the interest of their clients and to always act ethically. However, joining NAR is not mandatory, and some real estate salespeople may choose not to participate. They maybe don't want to pay NAR's annual fee. So in that case, the agent is just a salesperson or just a broker without the realtor designation. And property managers are another type of professional who handle real estate for other people. In Florida, if you get paid a commission or a percentage of rent for showing, advertising, or leasing property, you have to have a broker's license. However, if you own a property and you manage it yourself, or let's say you're an employee of a licensed property management company and you're just acting under their broker, no license is required. All right, so now that you know the main players in the real estate industry, let's talk about the best practices for hiring them. I'm going to go through 7 tips for working with an agent to rent a home. So number 1 is to get a referral when possible. If you know someone who found a great rental in the area where you want to live and they used an agent or a property manager, be sure to get their contact information. Those people know a lot, and it's definitely worth following up with them. The second tip is to ask agents if they handle rentals. Not all salespeople handle rentals. However, some brokerages specialize in them, and they may even have a dedicated property management department if, it's not the sole type of work that they do. So find out up front if an agent, is interested in helping you find a rental. Tip 3, understand how an agent gets paid. Find out if they'll get paid by the landlord of a property or they're going to get paid by you in order to avoid any surprises. I'll say typically when I've worked with an agent to find a rental, they've been paid by the landlord, but don't assume that's always the case. Also, find out what you get for any fee that they're going to charge you. Like, are they just going to send you a list of properties and you have to go look at them yourself? Or are they going to accompany you on tours? And are they going to help you complete a lease? All of those things are valuable and certainly well worth an agent's time and reason for getting paid. Tip number 4, work with a local expert. Using a local agent or manager is invaluable because they really understand different neighborhoods, the price trends, which landlords or even management companies have good reputations. They've likely also been in a lot of different apartment buildings, so they're very familiar with the amenities. Number 5, Allow them to save you time. An agent's familiarity with neighborhoods and buildings means that they can quickly filter out properties that don't meet your needs. For instance, if you say, I definitely want a pool or, I want someplace with a yard, they're going to be able to know, where to go to get that. Plus, they can coordinate multiple property viewings by scheduling appointments on your behalf. That can really save you time, especially if you're coming from out of the area, maybe even traveling long distance to see potential properties. Number 6, get more choices. An agent has access to the Multiple Listing Service, or MLS, which includes rentals, and it also includes listings that may be open to getting a lease instead of a purchase offer. So that may give you a much wider range of rental choices than just what's publicly available. And number 7, let them negotiate. Many landlords are willing to adjust rent prices or even lease terms, and an experienced agent will gladly negotiate for you. So just be ready with documents to prove your identity, income, employment, and previous landlord references if you have them. Okay, now let's move on to tips for hiring a real estate agent to buy a home. Finding the right agent to represent you as a real estate buyer is critical because it can be a complex process. It can even be a somewhat emotional process. So you want to find a good agent who's got a lot of experience. They know the area where you want to live inside and out. They're a good communicator, and they're just somebody that you're going to trust to go through this whole process with you. So let's go through 7 tips for working with a buyer's agent. Number 1, get a referral when possible. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot. If you know someone who had a great buying experience in the area where you want to find a home, a referral could be extremely helpful. You might also see an agent's name on yard signs in the neighborhoods that you like. However, that doesn't mean you have to work with them. It might be a great choice, but remember that a listing agent's primary responsibility is to their client, and that's the seller who pays their sales commission, which means they'd represent both you and the seller as a dual agent. Now, there are pros and cons to that type of relationship, and I'll talk about them in just a moment. Also, take note if the person is a realtor, salesperson, or broker to better understand their level of experience and education. All right, the second tip is to work with a local expert. I'm going to say that again and again. Using a local agent is invaluable because they've got a deep understanding of a neighborhood's listings, the recent sales, community features, amenities, typical costs, future plans, school districts, and a lot more. Tip number 3. Interview multiple agents. Unless you find the perfect agent, right off the bat, I would consider interviewing a few to understand their expertise, their network, their availability, communication style, feelings about the housing market, and their technical savvy. You'll find there's a lot of variation from agent to agent. Number 4, ask for references. A good salesperson or broker should have many happy clients that they'd be willing to let you speak with. So take the time to get their references and then speak with those people about whether the agent is responsive, detail-oriented, well-connected, and a good negotiator. Number 5, discuss the buyer's agreement. Due to a nationwide NAR, again, that's the National Association of Realtor, legal settlement about broker commissions, starting back in August of 2024, realtors must ask their buyers to sign a written buyer's agreement before taking them on home tours. So the agreement simply clarifies their services and how they get paid. And it was previously a requirement in many states, but now, it's a requirement everywhere. So it's going to be new in some states. You can negotiate the amount, like the percentage or a flat fee that you pay a buyer's agent. However, a percentage of the sale is typical. In reality, once you find a home, you can make a purchase offer contingent on the seller paying your agent's fee because that's typically how it's been done. Now, that doesn't mean, that's going to be the way it could work out for you, but I'm just offering that as something to think about, and it may be something just to talk to your buyer's agent about. But the seller may or may not agree to pay part of the commission. Note that if you sign an agreement with a buyer's agent, but let's say you go and tour a home with another agent, you may owe both parties a commission if you end up buying that home. So be sure you understand the duration of a buyer's agent agreement and the conditions for changing it or canceling it. Tip number 6. Ask about dual agency. So I mentioned that there might be a situation where a buyer's agent also has a listing, and in that case, they might be a dual agent for you. So first, recognize that they may have an inherent bias to show the listing that they have to you before they show you other people's listings. And, that's probably something that, a good listing agent is going to do. They want to show the property. Just realize that it's going to be somewhat of a conflict of interest. And if you make an offer on one of their listings, they become a dual agent. So that means they're going to represent both you and the seller in the same transaction. And that has to be legally disclosed, and they have to get your informed consent. In fact, they have to get informed consent from both parties to do that. Now, there are advantages to being a dual agent. One might be just having more streamlined communication, which could lead to a faster or smoother transaction. Additionally, a listing agent may be willing to cut their commission if it's allowed by their brokerage, since they won't have to split the commission with another office. Since a seller typically pays a real estate commission, as I mentioned, that could save the seller money, but it also could save you money if the seller insists that they're not going to pay any part of the buyer side. However, the downside of a dual agency is that as an agent is typically paid by the seller on the purchase price, they tend to prefer a higher price rather than a lower one. So that's a difficult conflict of interest to overcome when a buyer's agent is supposed to advocate for the buyer's best interest, which is certainly paying a lower price. So instead of having a dedicated representative, a dual agent is supposed to be more of a neutral facilitator in the transaction, not really advising or negotiating for either side. And that can mean both parties get a little less than they deserve. So find out if a dual agency is something the agent has experienced or if they think it's, potentially could happen. And number 7, get a mortgage pre-approval first. A good buyer's agent will only work with you after knowing you have the financial ability to buy a home and for how much. They usually have mortgage lenders or brokers to recommend if needed. Okay, now let's talk about hiring a real estate agent to sell a home. Selling a home as a listing agent requires different skills than working as a buyer's agent. Namely, you've got to be a pretty savvy marketer and understand how to accurately price a property. So let's go through 7 tips for working with a listing agent. Number 1, get a referral when possible. If you know someone who loved working with a listing agent in your area, they could be right for you too. But this is always the best first step before working with any professional, and it's for good reason. There is no substitute for a personal review. If someone you trust believes an agent is great, it increases the odds that you'll have a good experience too. Number 2, interview multiple agents. Unless you already know the perfect agent, consider interviewing a few to understand their marketing expertise, communication style, feelings about the housing market, and technical savvy. Review their listings to see if the photos are professional and have well-written and compelling descriptions. Consider how close their listing prices are to the selling prices and how long these properties took to sell. So those are all clues about, how well and accurate a listing agent may be when setting prices. Tip number 3, Work with a local expert. Similar to buying a home and renting, using a local agent is critical because they're going to have a deep understanding of a neighborhood's listings, recent sales, community features, amenities, typical costs, future plans, school districts, and potential buyers. Number 4, ask about any support staff. Some high-producing listing agents employ a whole team of people to work with them for things like administration, setting appointments, handling paperwork, and a lot more. So understand who your primary point of contact would be and how any team members would handle your needs. Number 5, ask for references. Take the time to speak with a listing agent's references about their marketing and negotiation skills. Plus, if they have a staff, find out if they're responsive, detail-oriented, and work well together. Number 6, discuss the listing agreement. Review the contract and the commission that the person is going to ask you to sign. But remember that the real estate commissions are negotiable and they would be split between their brokerage and any buyer's agent's office. Also, ask about the probability of a dual agency situation, like I mentioned, and how they would handle it. And number 7, request a comparative market analysis, or CMA. Once you sign a listing agreement with an agent, they should create a detailed CMA. Basically, that compares your property to similar homes that have recently sold, are currently on the market, or failed to sell. And that's the best way to price a home correctly. All right, now that we've gone through all of these, whether you're hiring a listing agent, a buyer's agent, or a property manager, you can check your state's real estate commission to confirm that they are licensed, and you can check to see if they have any disciplinary actions. And I'll give you a list of questions that might help you narrow down the right professional for your situation. I would ask, how many years have you worked in the real estate business? What's your typical client like? What price range is your typical transaction? What type of work do you specialize in? Are there neighborhoods that you specialize in? How many properties have you sold or rented in the last year? How do you usually communicate and process paperwork? How many clients are you working with right now? How often are you a dual agent in a transaction? What's your process for finding homes to sell or buyers to buy? Do you have a list of recommended vendors? And would you allow me to contact your most recent clients? I hope this has been helpful if you are in the market right now for buying a home, selling a home, or renting one. That's all for now. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, here's to living a richer life. Money Girl is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast, and I want to thank our wonderful team. Steve Rickyberg audio engineers the show. Holly Hutchins is our director of podcast. Morgan Christensen is our advertising operations specialist. And Nathaniel Hoops is our marketing contractor.